Omar Khan and the Pittsburgh Steelers have been making a lot of moves. And the most surprising move, to at least to me, was one that they didn't make, which was declining Najee Harris's fifth-year option. I was completely blown away, guys. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of the draft picks as well. Steelers had a draft since the last time we spoke, or finished out the draft since the last time we spoke. So please hit that like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell. That being said, let's get into it. Now, Najee Harris's fifth-year option for a running back wasn't going to be that expensive. I think it was just south of $7 million. So I was kind of taken back by that. You know, Najee Harris has been a dependable guy for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been available. I think that's been his best ability, is his availability. You know, his durability has been second to none in the NFL. In fact, I think it's only himself and like Creed Humphrey who have played the most snaps or games or something of that nature. I believe there was a stat out there that he's gotten 1,000 yards rushing in his first 3 years as a running back. So why not sign him? It's not like it's going to cost him a lot. Also, the salary cap, man, it grew quite a bit this past offseason. You know, a lot more than expected. And with all these new ways of watching the NFL, whether it be on Prime or regular cable, DirecTV, Paramount, or whoever, Peacock, I think had one as well. Because the NFL is getting these deals done, there's more money coming in. So that allows for more money for the players as well, for a bigger salary cap. So even though we don't know what it is going to be next year, at this point, obviously, it's probably going to be a lot higher than what it was this year. And I don't know we're going to see a jump as high as we saw this year, but you never know. Either way, it's not a lot of money. So why not extend him? Why not sign him? You know, is it a stat thing? Is it his performance? Well, let's look at a couple of players, including himself. When it comes to, like, I guess, a bust in the NFL for the running back position, most people will look at Trent Richardson, former running back of the Cleveland Browns and Indianapolis Colts. He played in 46 games. His rushing success rate was 41.7, and his yards per attempt was 3.3 yards. Compared to Najee, he's at 47.2 success rate, so a lot higher than Trent Richardson, 3.9. So it's not the best, but it's also higher than Trent Richardson as far as yards per average. And obviously, Najee Harris has played more games, so I don't think he's a bust. Let's compare him to, I think the guy that a lot of people were comparing him to when he came out of Alabama, which is Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's success rate is 49.3 compared to Najee's 47.2. So it's just a little bit lower than that. Yards per attempt is 4.7, though, compared to Najee's 3.9. That's a big concern. I mean, that's almost a full yard per attempt. So just to kind of see where Najee falls in, I think that he still maybe perhaps falls behind Derrick Henry. I mean, last season, let's just look at last season alone. Last season, success rate for Najee Harris was 48.2, and Derrick Henry had a slump. He was at 47.1. So that 49.3 was because of the years before. He's had years where it's 54.5, 56.6. Mind you, I believe that 56.6 in 2020 was under Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator. Najee Harris, I think his highest was last season at 48.2. So I do think that as far as when you compare him to Derrick Henry, he is below Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's had a few years on him now. If we look at his first 3 years, his success rate was 54.5%, 45.5, and 50.2. So it was still pretty much up there. And yards per attempt were 4.5, 4.2, 4.9 in his first 3 years as well. So Najee falls below Derrick Henry. And if we talk about the elite running back, which in my opinion right now would be Christian McCaffrey, overall his success rate is 50.4. So more than half the time he's winning on rushing yards. And for last season in total, he was at 54% success rate. He has a 4.8 yards per average, 5.4 last season alone. Definitely the premier running back, but he's also getting paid quite a bit. It's not just south of $7 million. He's getting paid quite a bit. McCaffrey's making about $16 million a year, which, like I said, he's the elite. He deserves that pay. He does everything. Najee Harris, if he were to have gotten the fifth-year option, would have been just slightly less than 7. And Derrick Henry right now is getting paid just around $8 million a year. So I would have thought that $7 million kind of falls in line where you would expect him to be at compared to where you have Christian McCaffrey, who's the elite. You have Derrick Henry, who overall, I think, especially early on in his career, he's probably a little bit more successful than what Najee Harris has been. But, Najee also has had an offensive line that's been remade several times. And players have gone in and out there. So does that play a role? Maybe. I mean, there's been times where we've seen Najee Harris dancing instead of running people over. And there's just been a lot of debate whether or not he's the best running back on the team right now. Behind him is Jaylen Warren, an undrafted guy. I know a lot of the conversation was, Jaylen Warren gets more yards than Najee Harris because they're not preparing him to run the ball, or when he comes in, they have to be honest, play honest, and not give up the pass. And so there's more running lanes for him. And I don't think so. I mean, there's been several times where he's hitting the back, where he's having to make somebody miss, where he's bouncing off of people. And if we look at his stats, and when we compare him to Najee Harris, last year, Najee Harris had 255 attempts to Jalen's 149. Najee Harris was able to accumulate 1,035 yards for a 4.1 yard average. Najee Harris, in his 149 attempts, accumulated 784 yards for a 5.3 yard average. Right now, when you look at it, Najee Harris has had more than 100 carries than Jalen Warren and has just under 300 yards more than Jalen Warren. You know, if Jalen Warren would have gotten the same amount of attempts, and, you know, obviously I think maybe some of his, you know, rushing yards per average might dip a little bit, but if it was to stay at 5.3, he would have surpassed Najee Harris's yards by over 300 yards. In the reception department, and Jalen Warren has it, he had 61 receptions to Najee Harris's 29. Jalen Warren had 370 yards receiving to 170 for Najee. And Jalen had a 6.1 reception yard. And the only other thing that Najee kind of won in is in fantasy points. But outside of that, it really shows you that you don't have to pay that much money for a running back. Again, Jalen Warren was an undrafted free agent when he became a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers have redone the offensive line. Zach Frazier in the middle. I'm assuming Troy Fatuanu is going to end up being on the right side. I think they want Broderick on the left side. Fatuanu mentioned that he had practiced on the right side and practiced at several different positions on the offensive line during college. So I think that's probably going to be the move. And I think Zach Frazier is also going to be a day one starter at the center position. And these guys are people movers. And I can see whoever they put back there as a running back going to be able to do some damage. Now, one of the things that's not really in Najee Harris's book of abilities is breakaway speed. When you have these linemen that are going to be able to move some people around and create some holes, you're going to want a running back that's going to be able to get through that hole. Maybe that's another reason why Najee Harris isn't getting that extension. Maybe the Steelers feel that the investment that they put into the offensive line will pay dividend on the fact that whoever's running the ball is going to have a lot of running lanes. And one last thing that I think maybe perhaps, and this one's probably the main reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers declined Najee Harris's fifth-year option, and I think it has to do with his attitude. You know, he was a former captain, and then he wasn't a captain last year. It was just Kenny Pickett. Now, a lot of people thought maybe it's just because they wanted, you know, Kenny to be the leader and this, that, and third, but maybe there was more to it. You know, if you go to the game against the Cleveland Browns, the second one, the one that the Pittsburgh Steelers lost 13-10, in the locker room had a lot of things to say. And not only did he have a lot of things to say, but a Pittsburgh Steelers spokesperson, media spokesperson, had attempted to end that interview that Najee Harris spoke for 5 minutes. And Najee Harris ignored him and even said at one point that the media can continue to ask questions, that it's fine. Now, what Najee Harris said, we can kind of go back, and this is around the time right before Matt Canada got fired. He said, there's just a lot of stuff that goes around that reporters don't see. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm just at a point, man, where I'm just tired of this. And then he had an explicitive. Is it fixable? Harris said rhetorically when asked about the offensive struggles. Yeah, but are we going to fix it with a question? Another thing he said was, I want to say what I really want to say, but it's just difficult. And then during that time, you know, Matt Canada ends up getting fired. You know, I think that this may have thrown a little bit of fuel to that flame. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not defending Matt Canada. He probably should have gone. But there was also some rumors and speculation that during that week that they considered benching Kenny Pickett after that Browns game. They ended up not doing that and firing Matt Canada. So maybe Harris was talking about Kenny Pickett. Maybe those were the things that he was finding that were difficult, that he was wondering if they were going to fix it. I mean, it sure did seem like something got fixed at the end of the year when Mason Rudolph came in, but I digress. Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, in my opinion, have kind of been, you know, molding this team the way they wanted, right? And there's not been much loyalty here. You know, the last first-round pick of Kevin Colbert's career as the general manager for the Pittsburgh Steelers was Kenny Pickett, and within 2 years later, he's no longer on the team. He's a backup for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I feel like there is no loyalty to these players. Omar Khan didn't pick them. These weren't his choices. And I'll be honest with you, when Kevin Colbert picked a quarterback in that last draft of his, I thought that was a bad move by the Pittsburgh Steelers to allow somebody to be picking a position that's no longer going to be on the team. Not because I thought that they were going to sabotage something or another, but just because you're going to be bringing in somebody new, even if they were still, you know, part of the team at the time, like Omar Khan was. Who's to say Kenny Pickett wasn't his vision for the Pittsburgh Steelers as a quarterback? Now let's go back. We'll talk about some of these main players that Kevin Colbert drafted over the last few years. We'll go back to 2020. So in the 2022 draft, Kenny Pickett, first one, he's out, and he had an attitude problem as well. It appears that he wasn't too pleased about dressing behind Mason Rudolph. We all heard him say that he didn't learn anything from watching Mason Rudolph. And apparently he asked to be traded out because he didn't want to deal with the competition between himself and Russell Wilson. So, I mean, this guy's supposed to be your captain, your leader. He was the only offensive captain last season. He's not buying in at this point either. Send him out. George Pickens, he's on the team still. But a lot of people question whether or not he's going to get a second contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's got some, issues on the field that create some personal foul penalties, and he's going to have to control himself. DeMarvin Leal, he didn't even get a helmet most of the year last year towards the end. I highly doubt DeMarvin Leal makes the team. Calvin Austin III. Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers drafting Roman Wilson here recently and adding some significant depth to the wide receiver position with Van Jefferson and Quez Watkins. You already have George Pickens, and Arthur Smith's offense really doesn't, throw to the 3 or 4 receiver. It's usually just 1 or 2. And then you have the tight ends that are mixed into that. The writing on the wall might be there on the wall for Calvin Austin. His return ability was one that I thought was excellent. But the Steelers go out there and get Cordell Patterson. Now, he's going to be returning kickoffs. I'm not sure if he's going to be returning punts as well. But that's why you also have Quez Watkins. So it'll be interesting. He's going to have to prove himself, Calvin Austin, this summer and into training camp. He's a fast guy. I hope he can get it done. Connor Hayward was the next pick in the 2022 draft. And, the Steelers went out there and got Michael Pruitt, formerly of the Atlanta Falcons, a guy that Arthur Smith was coaching in his last place. Now, I think that he probably liked what he brought to the table if he's bringing him over from Atlanta to Pittsburgh. You already got Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. Is there going to be a spot or room for Connor Hayward? He's listed as a tight end fullback. I'm not sure he's a fullback that you want to use in Arthur Smith's offense. He's not your traditional fullback. He's a tweener. He's kind of in between, a tight end and a fullback. When watching him last year, blocking, especially out in the open when he's pulling or things like that, really didn't go in his favor. The 7th round picks for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2022 were Mark Robinson and Chris Oladokun. Chris is already out. He didn't even make the team that year. Mark Robinson was more of a project guy. I think Brian Flores saw something in him, and he's no longer on the team either. Pittsburgh Steelers went out and got Peyton Wilson in the draft, got Patrick Queen in free agency. Landon Roberts already as well. I think that you're probably going to see Peyton Wilson play some special teams and get a lot of that action as well, just based on the fact that he's a rookie. So this might push Mark Robinson off of the team, maybe onto the practice squad. All right, let's jump down to 2021. We got Najee Harris. His 5th year wasn't signed, so he's going to be a free agent next year. Pat Freiermuth, his contract's coming up here pretty soon as well. When it comes to Pat, I think he has a lot of potential. I really do. I think that he needs to work on his blocking. There was a lot of issues with his blocking last year, but a lot of that also could have been due to injury. I think he had a rib injury at one point, very early on. I think it was against the 49ers. And, there were times where he just, laid on the floor and hoped somebody fell over him or something. That's not going to fly. I thought that as he got healthier throughout the year, he got more physical. I think he's going to end up getting a second contract. I think, the city loves him. The team loves him. I think he's an excellent tight end. He just, needs to put that potential together and maybe perhaps an offense that'll throw him the ball. I think that was a huge component of him not getting, as many throws or touchdowns or catches or receptions, is that the offense wasn't designed that way. I don't know how it's going to work with Russell Wilson, as Russell's a guy that really also doesn't, target the middle of the field either. Only time will tell. 3rd round was Kendrick Green. He's out of here. He was a mistake for the Pittsburgh Steelers to try to put him at center, and, I feel bad for Ben being behind that line, behind Kendrick Green and Dan Moore. 4th round, he was the next guy taken. And this is a guy that, to be honest with you, everybody's been wanting a different left tackle out there. He was drafted and he was put out there. Following that was Buddy Johnson. He's no longer on the team. Isaiah Loudermilk, he's still a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he's also a guy that really hasn't produced a lot. The Steelers went up and traded for him too. He hasn't produced much. I think he's getting a helmet more over DeMarvin Leal as of recent, but I think if the Steelers can find somebody to replace him, maybe perhaps Logan Lee, the guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers just drafted, defensive end in the 6th round, he could be trying to take those positions. The next 3 guys that the Steelers drafted, Quincy Roche, Trey Norwood, and Presley Harvin, are no longer on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Presley and Trey made the team initially. I think Trey played for 2 years, and then he was cut, or in his 2nd year was cut. Presley Harvin was just recently cut. As soon as the season ended, he was gone. And we'll go back to 2020. So on the 2020, you have Chase Claypool was the first player selected. I know that a lot of people are going to look at Minkah Fitzpatrick as the 1st round pick. And if you do, then yeah, it was a slam dunk. But, you already knew what you had in Minkah. He already had a year in the pros. You knew what Miami was doing as far as, tanking and things like that. The Steelers knew what he was. It wasn't a big risk. It's not like you're drafting a guy out of college and he's never played against, professional team. If you put that in the mix as a draft pick, then so be it. It was a great pick. But the ones that they actually drafted, Chase Claypool, no longer on the team. I don't even think he's in the NFL anymore. I think he's going to Canadian Football League. Alex Highsmith. Yeah, he's been up and down in my opinion. He had some flashes early on, and then a couple of years ago had a really good year with like 14 sacks or something like that. But then last year, production dropped down again. A lot of people were saying, well, TJ Watt was missing. And so a lot more of attention went towards Alex Highsmith, and he couldn't overcome some of those things. And that may or may not be accurate. I'm sure if you have TJ Watt on the other side, attention going towards TJ is going to be a result of that, and the outcome being more one-on-one situations between himself and the opposition. But Alex Highsmith's had great potential. He's shown a lot, and he was a good pick. Behind him was Anthony McFarland, who's also no longer in the NFL. Kevin Dodson, I think he would have been a great player had the Steelers just used him the way he is accustomed to being used. He was a right guard, a people mover, and the Steelers were trying to change him. They wanted him to switch over from one side to the other. And I don't even think they saw the writing on the wall there that he was going to have trouble doing so. I mean, his first year, I don't know if you guys remember, he was always in a 3-point stance. Even if they were passing the ball or running the ball and everybody else was in a 2-point stance, he was in a 3. Like his adjustment from one side to the other, or even being in one position or another was subpar, to say the least. And the Pittsburgh Steelers try to force him into being a left guard and everything else. And when he goes to Los Angeles, they put him back on the right guard. Obviously, he's probably accustomed to the stances, but it took him some time. And sure enough, he ended up being a pretty good lineman. He's a people mover, but that's what they want him to do over there. Pittsburgh, they wanted to contain him and do something different, be more of a zone blocker. It's kind of like equivalent to taking a running quarterback or an athletic quarterback and trying to force them to simply be in the pocket. Sometimes it doesn't work. Antoine Brooks was after that, and Carlos Davis after that, no longer on the Steelers. So when you look back at these players that Kevin Colbert drafted, and you see that Omar Khan is replacing people, I mean, I think that this is what was really needed to happen. I think the last few years of Kevin Colbert's time with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think they felt that as long as they had Ben Roethlisberger, there was a chance that they go to the Super Bowl. And in doing so, I think they put a lot of Band-Aids on some things they should have fixed in efforts to not be in a complete rebuild with a quarterback that you feel can take you to the distance. And in the end, that probably wasn't the best for the team. The Steelers ended up having to draft a quarterback out of need, ended up with Kenny Pickett and things like that. Not addressing the center position and drafting Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth without getting a Creed Humphrey. Those type of moves where you think you're just a playmaker away from being a contender. And at that point, they really needed help in the offensive line. And so Omar Khan and Andy Weil have really invested into the offensive line. I'm excited to see what's going to happen. Next up, I think we're going to have rookie minicamp and also the schedule release. So stay tuned for that. But that's all I got for you guys today. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Please hit that like and subscribe button and ring that notification bell if you haven't done so. Until next time, peace.